Welcome back in, everyone, to the Lucky Shots podcast. Ricky Larson back with you today as we hop into the Week 8 Game Day show. Let's get this down. Oh, dear Lord. There we go. Back in with the Week 8 Game Day show before we get into Thursday night football. So we're going to hop back, see what happened last week. Quite a few games to talk about there. With some of the interesting matchups that I think are coming up for Week 8, and then we'll get my Week 8 picks. Picks have really turned around for me, as has fantasy football. Got a couple of wins in 2 leagues last week. Did real well on the picks for last week as well. I'm now in first place for the group that I am in, so things are starting to turn around. Stay diligent. It's a long NFL season. You could get yourself back into the mix of things. So let's look at Week 7 last week. We'll start with, are the Cardinals back? They won 42-34 against New Orleans. Their defense looked great. They had 3 interceptions, and 2 of those were actually right at the end of the first half. They go out, get a pick 6, puts them up by a touchdown, and then come out the next drive, Andy Dalton throws another interception, and it's another pick 6. So they had 2 pick 6s, dang near back-to-back at the end of that first half. And then throughout the game, you had D-Hop in his return just, controlling the game. He had 10 catches, 103 yards. Benjamin went out there, had a really good game. The backup running back for James Conner, he had 92 rushing yards, a touchdown, and tacked on 4 catches. So very impressive victory. They looked very good. Offense was still a little shaky for the Cardinals, but that's a lot of points. And your defense put up a lot of those as well. So who knows? Maybe the Cardinals are back to being a team that we need to look out for going on through the season. I was very excited about D-Hop coming back. It helped their team a lot, so we'll have to see how it pans out. The Ravens have been looking kind of shaky lately. They survive a scare 23-20 against Cleveland. Offensively, was not a hot game for them. They had 250 total yards, only 94 yards through the air. It's definitely not the winning formula. You don't want to, have to put your defense in those kind of spots when you're not gaining a lot of yardage. But their defense did step up. They had 5 sacks, forced 2 turnovers. That, I think, is what kept them in the game and was able to make them pull out that victory. We do have the Ravens tonight on Thursday Night Football. So is it going to continue to be shaky, or are they going to get it figured out? That's the real question there. The other team we're going to have on Thursday night, the Buccaneers. They got squashed this past week, 21-3 against Carolina. They didn't have any turnovers, but they were 2 for 12 on third downs, 1 for 3 on fourth down. If you're not converting on offense, it's going to be a very, very tough day for you. And it was for the Buccaneers. We've seen them struggling all year. Are they, what's happening with them? Tom Brady, we know all the stuff going on with him, but football-wise, he's not playing super well. Offensively, they're just having way too many struggles. It's going to be very tough. And it actually makes for a pretty interesting Thursday night matchup against the Ravens, who are also struggling a little bit. The Bengals back on track. They looked real good this past week, winning 35-17 against Atlanta. Joe Burrow kind of looked like Joe Burrow of last year, 481 pass yards, 4 touchdowns. And when Joe Burrow looks like he did last year, that means Jamar Chase is going to look the same as well. 8 catches, 130 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then the wide receiver 2 was not T. Higgins. It was Tyler Boyd this week. He had 8 catches, 155 yards, and a touchdown. So big time game for the Bengals offense. Are we going to continue to see that? Because that's what everybody expected to see from the Bengals going into this year. It's what everybody wants to see. So can they keep that going? Looked pretty good against Atlanta. What do we think of the Packers for, this beginning part of the season where they've been pretty not good? And then they lost this past week, third straight week where it's been an upset against Green Bay. They lost 23-21 versus Washington. The 2 weeks before, 27-10 against the Jets, 27-22 against the Giants. They're sitting at 3-4 now. Not good. Not good at all. They asked Aaron Rodgers after the game, what's going on? How do you feel? Are you worried about going into Buffalo this week? He said all the right things, but I haven't seen anything out of this team that tells me they are even a playoff contender yet, which is very weird to say about the Packers. But you're every week we're just sitting, waiting for them to get it figured out, waiting for them to get it figured out. It's just not happening yet. And two teams, the Buccaneers and the Packers, that we really expected to still be okay because it's Tom Brady and because it's Aaron Rodgers, not so much anymore. So be interesting to see if they turn this around, because if they don't, you got the Vikings sitting at, I think, 5-1, 6-1, atop that division right now. Could be the top seed going into, like, not top seed, but the top team from their division going into the playoffs. The Chargers, talk about teams having struggles. The Chargers are right there. They lost 37-23 against Seattle. They gave up 3 sacks, 2 turnovers. They had 7 penalties. Just a sloppy game, and Seattle, they took advantage. What else is bad about the Chargers team? Their defense cannot stop the run for anything. 214 rushing yards for Seattle. So Seattle had just about as many rushing yards as the Ravens had as an entire offensive unit. But the Chargers, they just can't stop anybody when they try to run the football. So it always makes for nice, juicy matchups in the fantasy world. But if you're a Chargers fan, just like, watching football, it's hard to watch when a defense just gets ran all over for an entire game, and that's what's happening to the Chargers. So that's the main problem they need to fix, and then work their way out from there. And then, how about this on Monday Night Football? You had the Bears rout the Patriots. It was 33-14. They had 243 rushing yards. They forced 4 turnovers. Talk about a team that just looked impressive as heck. That was the Bears last week. Everybody was on the Patriots. Everybody expected the Patriots, especially after last week, to come out and just put a whooping on Chicago. But Chicago had other plans. In a division where that second spot is clearly open because of the Packers not being all that great, could the Bears possibly, if they continue to play this way, be a sneaky late season playoff run team? I don't think so, but it's a possibility. You play that kind of football, you play that well, you can make some things happen. So very interesting outcomes from last week. Now let's look at week 8, the games that I am most interested in for this upcoming week. Just talked about both these teams, but the Thursday night game tonight is Baltimore and Tampa Bay. Baltimore struggling, as is Tampa Bay. So two teams just really going through it, going to try to get it figured out against each other. Baltimore, they won versus Cincinnati by 2, but then they lost to the Giants by 4 and barely beat the Browns by 3. All of these games decided by 1 score or less, with Baltimore just barely eking those out. Something goes different in either one of their 2 wins, they're sitting here at a not great record, and people wondering what the hell is going on with Baltimore. Tampa Bay, already kind of touched on everything that's wrong there. Uh, you know, who's going to be the team that gets this figured out? I normally go with the better defense, but Baltimore's still got a pretty decent defense. That's what kept them in the game last week. I do think Tampa Bay overall is a better defense, but I think the Baltimore Ravens have it more put together this week. And Tampa, get it figured out. You're not fun to watch anymore, and that's what 90% of the football community wants to see is just fun football. Tampa Bay is not that. It'll be an interesting matchup. That is tonight, Thursday night football. Then Arizona and Minnesota. This one pretty interesting to me because Arizona, they're getting back on track. They've got D Hop. We already saw how much of a factor he plays in this offense from last week. But then on the other side, you got Minnesota sitting at 5-1, looking like one of the top few teams in the NFC. The NFC is, let's be honest, pretty weak. You've got a couple teams that are solid contenders, and then you've got middle of the pack teams throughout. Minnesota, they're sitting up in that top tier, playing good offense, playing good defense, just putting together complete games, which is something they couldn't do last year. That's why they had so many losses by one possession or less. So this one's going to be fun. I think we're going to see a lot of offense in that game. So if you got anybody fantasy-wise in those matchups, go ahead and play them because I think it's going to be a good game for both offenses. Who's going to win? Probably just the team that gets the ball last. That's the kind of game I'm expecting, and that's what I'm hoping to see. Chicago and Dallas. Why the hell am I excited to see a Chicago game? Well, after what they did last week, with how shaky the Cowboys looked with Dak in his first week back, I think this could be a much more interesting matchup than a lot of people anticipate. Prescott, is he going to continue to move back up from, being out since week one, having kind of a down performance last week? And can Chicago build on what they did on Monday night? That's the real question is Chicago going to be able to put those kinds of games together consistently? Because if they can, they're going to look pretty dang good, but it's going to be a tough task, especially against Dallas. Dallas is a tough defense. So at the very least, we're probably going to see a defensive struggle. Probably Dallas coming out on top, but it is worth noting that Chicago had a big week. Could be another big week for them this week. Then you've got New England and the Jets. New England looked pretty okay for most of the year, and then last week just looked absolutely awful. And then you got the Jets sitting at 5-2, at a very surprising 5-2. If you told me at the beginning of the season the Jets are going to be 5-2 at any point in the year, I would have been like, you're a little crazy. I think you need to get yourself checked. But that's where they're sitting right now. And not really anything thanks to their passing offense or much of that. It's been a old school, pretty good defense, run the ball down their throats. That's interesting. But you've got Breece Hall, who just went down with a knee injury. So how do you replace him? You go trade for James Robinson. What's that going to look like going into the rest of the season with Breece Hall being out presumably all year? James Robinson now coming in and being that guy. And do the Jets figure it out passing the ball? I don't think so, because they haven't done that yet. Even though they've got all the weapons to do it, they just don't know what a passing game is. And can New England get back on track? That'll be the story of the week. Then you got the Giants and Seattle. The Giants sitting at 6-1. Talk about another surprising team. Did not expect the Giants to be sitting at 6-1 at all, but it's where they're at. In Seattle, they're coming off their big win against the Chargers. Two teams that rely heavily on two very good running backs. I like that. We'll probably see a lot of running the football. I do think the Giants have a more solid defense. You have to if you're 6-1 as compared to Seattle, who I think is 3-4, maybe 2-5. So that's going to be a fun game. I think there's going to be a lot of offense. The only problem I see with it being an offensive shootout is possibly New York's defense shuts down Seattle a little bit. And then the last game, Washington versus Indy. Washington, they were without Carson Wentz last week, had Taylor Heineke, and they looked better immediately. They looked like a team that can compete. So what they do, they went out and won. They beat the Packers and played a pretty full game. But what does Indianapolis look like now? Because they are benching Matt Ryan. They're going to be starting Sam Ehlinger. So what does this offense look like with Sam Ehlinger? Do they finally start to get the ball moving? I mean, we haven't really seen much out of this Colts offense, especially with Jonathan Taylor, who was the best running back in the league last week. Or not last week, last year. So possibly Ehlinger is that secret ingredient, but we're definitely going to have to tune in and see just what he's made of and what the Colts look like without Matt Ryan. So let's finish off with Week 8 picks, checking in on the records for me in the primetime games. 4-3 in Thursday night, so finally over 500 there. 6-1 on Sunday Night Football, killing it, and Monday Night Football sitting at 3-5. Was one step closer to being 500 on Monday night, and then the Bears pulled out what they pulled out. So hopefully we continue to build here, and hopefully I continue to build my lead in my pick'ems as well. So Thursday night, talked about that game, Baltimore versus Tampa. I think Baltimore is going to take that one. I just think their team is a little more put together right now than the Buccaneers, but interesting game nonetheless. Going with Baltimore. Denver versus Jacksonville. Could be the last time I choose Denver because I don't think it matters what they do, it's just not working. But Jacksonville also struggling. I think maybe Denver can pull one out here against a equal to or lesser than team. So we're going with Denver there. Then Miami versus Detroit. Sticking with Miami. That should be a fun game as well. Hopefully a lot of offense there from both teams. But we're taking the Dolphins. Carolina versus Atlanta. Let's go with Carolina. They looked pretty impressive last week. Atlanta, not so much. I think it's going to be a pretty close game because they are two kind of bottom feeders of their own division. But I think Carolina will go ahead and take that one. Arizona versus Minnesota. Let's take the upset. Let's take Arizona. I think, they got that spark last week from getting D-Hop back, winning the game. I think you got Minnesota coming off of a bye, be a little sleepy to start the game. So let's take Arizona in an upset there. Chicago versus Dallas. Still going to stick with Dallas. Much better resume and more put together football team. Not just a flash in the pan, which possibly that's all Chicago is from last week. So we're going with Dallas. Then you got the Raiders and the Saints. This one was kind of tough to choose because, do we honestly think the Raiders are that good, or is it just Josh Jacobs? Is New Orleans actually that bad, or what's going on there? But I'm going with the Raiders. When you have Josh Jacobs go off for 30 fantasy points 3 weeks in a row, kind of hard to bet against that kind of run game. So we're going to go with Vegas. Then Philly and Pittsburgh. Got to go with Philly. Still the only undefeated team left. They are coming off of their bye. Pittsburgh just not super impressive at all. And poor Kenny Pickett, to be honest, because he finally got the start And then he has had the worst stretch of defenses to have to go against to start his career. Philly is no different. We're going with Philly there. We're going to take the Jets over the Patriots. This one's probably, honestly, a toss-up. I don't think New England's going to get their butts kicked as bad as they did last week, but they still might not be that good. The Jets, now with James Robinson at the helm for running back, do they get their offense going more than just being the run game? Can they, put New England in tough spots? I think we're going to go with the Jets there. Titans versus the Texans. I'm going to go with the Titans there. I think Derrick Henry is going to absolutely demolish that defense, and it's going to be a rough day for Houston. Then we got the Giants and Seahawks. We'll stick with the Giants. We'll stick on the Giant train there, just expecting it to go off the rails at some point. But until it does, I am gonna continue to pick them. Then Washington against Indy. This one is considered another upset. Indy is the favorite, but we're gonna go with Washington. I just don't know what the Colts are gonna look like with a new young quarterback making his first start. I have to see what that looks like. Washington, I again think they look much better with Taylor Heineke. So that could be a fun matchup. I think it's going to be a defensive matchup, but we're going to go with Washington. San Francisco and the Rams. We're going to go with San Francisco. This game to me is the biggest toss-up of the week because this one I look at it and I'm like, honestly, who the hell knows? San Francisco has looked absolutely terrible at times. The Rams have not looked like they looked last year. So I'm sitting here just putting my arms up saying flip a coin, and that's who I'm choosing. So we're going with San Francisco. Then on Sunday night, we're going to go with Buffalo. No upset for Green Bay, and be their first legitimate loss, I feel like, in the last 3 weeks, going up against Buffalo. I think Buffalo is going to absolutely pound them, but it's crazy. Crazy things could happen. It's primetime football as well, but looks like I don't lose on Sunday nights. So Buffalo going with the win there. And then Cincinnati versus Cleveland on Monday night. Let's go with Cincinnati. Hopefully their offense continues to fire on all cylinders like it has for the past couple of weeks. Hopefully Nick Chubb still goes out and puts up a good game, but I think Cincinnati has got the win there. So that is it for today, guys. No Lucky Bets podcast this week. Scheduling issues and all that. We will be back in with Dylan Corbett next week. But that's it for today. Tonight, you got your Thursday night game, Baltimore versus Tampa Bay. So I guess have fun with that one. We'll see what happens. And then we will see you next week. Thanks for joining, guys.